Okay, guys, hey, let's jump back in to Romans chapter 9, verse 7. Um, we just mentioned in that last video, but it's through Isaac shall your offspring be called. Okay, so what Paul was doing here was actually citing Genesis chapter 21, verse 12. Okay, so let me real quickly just read Genesis 21, verse 12, so that you guys will see. Paul's not making new stuff up. Paul is looking back on his Old Testament theology, and Paul is recognizing that these are things that God has already taught. Okay, so listen, this is Genesis chapter 21, verse 12. It says this, "But God said to Abraham, be not displeased because of the boy and because of your slave woman. Whatever Sarah says to you, do as she tells you, for through Isaac shall your offspring be named." Okay? Now, God made a declaration to Abraham way back in Genesis chapter 21, saying, through Isaac, it's through Isaac that your offspring is going to be named. Okay? So what Paul is doing is he's looking back on Old Testament scriptures and he's working through this Old Testament theology. Okay? Guys, this is important. Okay? So what was Paul declaring when he said through Isaac, or maybe not Paul, what was God declaring when he said through Isaac shall your offspring be named or be called? Listen, this is hugely important, okay? God was declaring that it was not to whom one was born that mattered, okay? It wasn't to whom one was born that mattered, all right? The Jews believed this because we are Abraham's descendants, because we are Isaac's descendants, because we are Jacob's descendants. We have favor and security with God, okay? But in Genesis 21, when God declares that it's through Isaac that his offspring would be named, or the Abraham's offspring would be named, right? God was declaring in that moment, it doesn't matter who you're born to, all right? Why would I say that? Because let me ask you a question. How many biological sons did Abraham have? I'll give you a second to think about it. Right? Ready? Here we go. What's the answer? The answer is 2. Abraham had 2 biological offspring. He had Isaac and he had Ishmael, right? 2 biological sons. But now let me ask you this question. Did the Jews believe that Ishmael and his offspring were recipients of God's promises in the same way that they believed that Isaac and his offspring would be? And guys, we know the answer to that, right? The answer to that is a resounding no, right? The Jews did not believe that Ishmael and his offspring were the recipients of God's promises in the way that they were, even though Ishmael was a son of Abraham just as much as Isaac was. Okay? So we need to understand that it's not to whom one was born that mattered. If that was the case, then Ishmael and all of his offspring would have been the recipients of the promises as well. Okay? But that's not what it's not how the way that God has ordered things. Paul's reminding us, God has said that it's through Isaac that your offspring shall be called or named. Okay? So, what does this mean? Well, thankfully, we have verses 8 and 9 that are going to help unpack this for us, okay? So let's dive into verses 8 and 9. This means that it is not the children of the flesh who are the children of God, but rather the children of the promise are counted as offspring. Okay, guys, huge set of verses here, okay? Listen to what he says. This means that it is not the children of the flesh who are the children of God. I want you to just tune in right here. Listen carefully. Guys, this is super important. The children of the flesh are not the children of God. All right, so guys, what this means is this. Children of God are not the result of human effort. One more time. Children of God are not the result of human effort. Listen to that verse 8. That means that it is not the children of the flesh who are the children of God, right? In Isaac and Ishmael, right? The story of Isaac and Ishmael, who's the child of the flesh? It's Ishmael, right? Ishmael's story is rooted in Abraham and Sarah's disbelief, and then not only their own disbelief, but their own attempts to figure out how to make God's promises come true. Right? Ishmael was the result of Abraham and Sarah going, we're not really convinced of God's promise. We got to figure out a way. We have to make a way for Abraham, for you to have some offspring. And so what do? They bring Hagar into the picture. And we have Abraham and Hagar entering into a relationship, right? This work of the flesh in order to bring a child about. But listen to what God is saying. It's not the children of the flesh who are the children of the promise, who are the children of God. So in other words, children of God are not the result of human effort. All right? But who are the children of God? He goes on to say, verse 8, but the children of the promise are counted as offspring. It's the children of the promise. And so what we need to hear here is this. Children of God are always the result of God's supernatural work. Okay? Listen again. Children of God are always the result of God's supernatural work. Guys, Isaac could not have been born through Abraham and Sarah's own efforts, right? Even if they had tried. They were both too old and Sarah was barren. We've talked about this, right? Isaac was not the result of human effort. Isaac was only conceived as a result of divine intervention, right? So the children of God, Isaac, are always the result of God's supernatural work, right? So this is where we've got to start making some connections. Yes, we have a picture in Isaac of a supernatural physical birth. But what we're talking about here in Romans chapter 9 is, guys, our spiritual birth is not the result of our human efforts, right? And again, guys, now we start to, again, ask the question, how does free will play into this? How does a choice on our part play into this, right? If it's not the result of human effort. Children of God, like Isaac, are always the result of supernatural divine intervention. God is the one who caused Isaac's birth to come about. You don't believe me? Look at verse 9. For this is what the promise said. About this time next year, listen to the next three words. I will return. That was God saying to Abraham, the birth is going to take place, or the conception is going to take place when I show up, when I return. Paul was reminding his readers of this. This is how Isaac's conception came about. God supernaturally and divinely intervened. And that's what caused Isaac's conception to take place. For this time next year, I will return, and Sarah shall have a son. Right? Isaac's birth was or conception and birth was the result of divine intervention. And guys, if we are children of Abraham, called through Isaac, we have to have a connection to Isaac. We have to share something in common with Isaac, and that is our new birth, right, is not the result of our own efforts. Our new birth is the result of supernatural divine intervention. It's God showing up and calling us to himself to be, listen, not physical offspring of Abraham, right? Not offspring of Abraham, but children of Abraham, those who share in the belief that Abraham had, okay? So it's God coming and doing a work in us. All right. Let's see. Verse 10 starts something a little bit different and a little bit new. We're going to go into a different picture in verse 10. So we're going to hold off and do that in a separate video, okay? But guys, just as you're thinking through this, it's really important for us to understand, right? Paul is sorrowful, and Paul feels unceasing anguish in his heart because there are Jewish people, those who are Jews by birth, who are not believing. And it makes him sad, right? It makes him sad that there are those who are like him who don't believe like he does and haven't experienced the salvation and the joy that Paul has experienced and that he is presently experiencing in Christ. It makes him sad. But at the same time, Paul is looking back at the Old Testament and going, but listen, I knew, right? I can read the Old Testament and I can see that it's not the physical offspring of Abraham who are truly his children. It was those who would believe like Abraham. And so as Paul's just beginning to work through this, he's helping us to understand how God has been at work in the past and how God is at work presently. That these things that are happening in the past are foreshadowings of spiritual realities and truths that are going to be taking place in the future. Okay? So, Ishmael is the result of human efforts. Abraham and Sarah saying, how do we figure out how to make this happen, because we can't do it on our own, so let's bring somebody else in and let's see if we can manipulate the situation so that through our own efforts we can create an offspring. Guys, and they did. They were successful. I mean, their plan worked. Ishmael came about. But God said, hey, I'm not calling people through Ishmael. I'm calling them through Isaac. So they're going to share something. They're going to have something in common with Isaac. And it's not going, listen, Isaac's birth was his conception and birth was supernatural. It was God showing up and God going to work, which caused Isaac to come about. And so when we see what's happening here, right, it's through Isaac that God is calling his children. Guys, that means it's a supernatural thing, right? That our new birth has got to be supernatural too. It's not a result of our works. It's the result of God's work. It's what God has done. He's initiated it. He started it. And on our own, we wouldn't be able to do it. But it's something that God does, okay? So let's kill it there. Not kill it. That's probably a bad word. Let's call it a video there, and I'll let you guys think on this for a little bit. Maybe I'll try to throw some questions on a discussion board for us to talk about. But guys, if you need to go back, think through this a little bit more. These are hard and weighty things to think, and I'm probably causing a lot of questions for you guys. So as you have them, please feel free to toss them back to me, and we can do another video just addressing some of the questions that you guys may have. But keep sticking with me. I told you guys, chapter 9 was going to be hard, and it wasn't going to get any easier. And again, I'm sorry that we're having to do this by video, but I'm going to do my best to work us through this. and we'll just do our best to kind of bring questions up that you guys may have, and I'll do my best to address them here. Okay, love you guys, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.